The Empire did not give cursed women a wedding ceremony. It gave them away like defective machinery. The wind howled across the frozen mining colony of Kepri Ridge, carrying needles of ice that scraped against Ethan Vale's worn work jacket as he stepped out of the cargo elevator. The station lights flickered overhead in tired yellow pulses. Somewhere deep below the steel platform, drilling engines groaned through miles of frozen rock. 12-hour shifts. 6 days a week. That was Ethan's life now. Quiet. Predictable. Empty. Exactly the way he wanted it after the war. Then the transport ship arrived. Its black hull descended through the snowstorm like a falling blade, scattering white frost across the landing deck. Ethan frowned. Nobody visited Kepri Ridge unless they were desperate or exiled. Usually both. Hydraulic doors hissed open. Four Imperial soldiers stepped out first, silver armor gleaming beneath the floodlights. Their helmets hid their faces, but the way they moved told Ethan everything. Noble guard. High-ranking. Dangerous. Then he saw her. The woman stood between them with glowing restraints locked around her wrists. Tall. Still. Silent. Her turquoise skin almost seemed to shimmer beneath the snowflakes collecting across her dark cloak. Long silver hair drifted in the wind like threads of moonlight. She looked less like a prisoner and more like a statue carved from winter itself. But nobody on the platform moved closer. Dockworkers backed away. One miner quietly made the sign against bad luck. Another whispered something Ethan barely caught. That's her. The cursed one. Ethan rolled his shoulders tiredly. Great. Just what this place needed. More Imperial drama. The lead officer approached him, boots crunching across the frost-covered metal. Ethan Vale. Ethan nodded once. Depends who's asking. The officer handed him a glowing datapad. By decree of the Imperial Tribunal, you have been selected for State Union Assignment 74. Ethan stared at him. I've been selected for what? Marriage. The word landed harder than the freezing wind. Ethan barked out a short laugh. Wrong station, buddy. Your war debt disqualifies refusal. The officer's voice remained cold and mechanical. In exchange for accepting the female into your custody, your remaining service penalties will be erased. Ethan looked past him toward the alien woman again. She never lifted her eyes from the ground. Snow gathered across her shoulders without melting. Why me? He asked quietly. The officer hesitated. Just long enough. Because previous candidates are deceased. Silence swallowed the landing platform. Even the drilling engines below seemed distant for a moment. Ethan slowly looked back at the woman. For the first time, she raised her head. Her eyes were luminous gold. Tired. Not cruel. Not angry. Just exhausted in a way that reached somewhere deeper than the body. You should refuse, she said softly. Her voice carried the smooth, melodic accent of the inner systems. People around me do not survive for very long. Ethan noticed the restraints around her wrists tightened slightly as she spoke. Strange symbols pulsed beneath her skin like faint blue lightning. The miners behind him immediately stepped farther away. Smart people, apparently. Ethan should have walked back inside. He should have told the Empire to send her somewhere else. But then the wind shifted, lifting part of her cloak, and Ethan saw bruises beneath the glowing restraints. Not fresh. Old ones. Layered over older ones. Like someone had been trying to contain a storm with chains. The officer extended the datapad again. Sign. Ethan stared at the woman another second. She looked away first. Like she already knew how this would end. He sighed through his nose, grabbed the pad, and pressed his thumb against the glowing screen. Somewhere above the station, thunder rolled through the clouds. The restraints around the woman's wrists unlocked with a metallic click. And for the first time since arriving on Kepri Ridge, the cursed alien looked genuinely afraid. The ride back to Ethan's housing unit was silent except for the rattle of loose metal panels and the distant groan of mining drills beneath the ice fields. Snow hammered against the transport windshield hard enough to sound like gravel. Ethan kept both hands on the steering controls while the station. Lights slid past in pale yellow streaks outside. Beside him, Lasara sat perfectly still beneath the dim cabin lights. No movement. No questions. Just quiet. The kind of quiet people carried after surviving too many things. Ethan finally exhaled through his nose. You always this cheerful? Her golden eyes shifted toward him for half a second. You should not joke about this. About what? About me being here. Ethan shrugged inside his heavy work coat. Little late for second thoughts. The corner of her mouth tightened slightly. Not quite a smile. More like someone remembering what one used to feel like. The transport rolled to a stop outside Ethan's housing block at the edge of the colony. Calling it a home would have been generous. It was an old maintenance structure bolted onto the side of the refinery cliffs nearly 20 years ago. Steel walls, frosted pipes, a heating system that only worked when threatened. But it was warm enough to survive the winters, and after the war Ethan had stopped asking life for more than survival. He stepped out first, boots crunching through 4 inches of fresh snow. "Come on," he muttered. Lasara hesitated before following him toward the doorway. Ethan noticed it immediately. The way she studied every corner, every rooftop, every dark window, like she expected something terrible to happen the moment she crossed the threshold. Inside, the heater hummed weakly against the cold. Orange lights spilled across cramped metal walls cluttered with spare engine parts, welding tools, and old military storage crates. The air smelled faintly of machine oil and burnt coffee. Ethan tossed his gloves onto the table. "It is not much," he admitted. Lasara slowly removed her hood. Silver hair spilled across her shoulders like liquid frost. Up close, she looked even more exhausted than before. There were faint shadows beneath her glowing eyes. Tiny fractures of pale blue light moved beneath the skin near her collarbone before fading again. Ethan pretended not to notice. "You can take the bed," he said. "I will use the couch." Her expression changed instantly. Confusion first, then suspicion. "Why?" Ethan blinked. "Because there is one bed." "No," her voice lowered carefully. "Why are you being kind to me?" That question hit harder than he expected. Ethan turned away toward the heater controls. "Maybe because everybody else out there acts like you are carrying a bomb." Perhaps they are correct. The room grew quieter after that. Wind screamed outside the metal walls. Somewhere far below, refinery sirens echoed through the storm. Ethan crouched beside the old heating unit, smacking the side panel until the vents coughed warmer air into the room. "You do not understand what I am," Lasara said softly behind him. "No," Ethan admitted. "Probably not." He stood and grabbed an old thermal blanket from a storage bin before tossing it toward her. She caught it automatically, almost startled by the gesture. "But I understand what fear looks like." Lasara stared down at the blanket in silence. The fabric was faded blue, old, worn thin around the edges. "Human. Everyone who stayed near me suffered," she whispered. "Then maybe they blamed the wrong thing." Ethan moved toward the tiny kitchen corner and started filling a dented kettle with water. "You hungry?" She looked at him as though he had spoken another language. "What?" "Soup. Coffee. Something hot." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You truly are either very brave or very foolish." Ethan smirked faintly while setting the kettle onto the burner. "I get that a lot." Then the lights went out. Total darkness swallowed the room instantly. The heater died with a hollow metallic click. Outside, thunder rolled across the frozen valley. Ethan reached for the flashlight near the counter when something inside the room suddenly lifted into the air behind him. Metal tools rattled violently. The kitchen table groaned against the floor. A blue glow illuminated the darkness. Ethan turned slowly. Lasara stood frozen near the wall, her eyes wide with panic as pale energy spiraled beneath her skin like living lightning. "Ethan," she whispered shakily. "Run." The temperature inside the room dropped so fast Ethan could see his own breath again. Frost spread across the steel walls in thin white veins while every loose object around Lasara trembled violently in the air. Wrenches, metal cups, loose bolts. Even the old ceiling lamp twisted slowly as if pulled by invisible gravity. Ethan stood perfectly still near the kitchen counter, flashlight hanging uselessly in his hand. The blue light beneath Lasara's skin had grown brighter now, pulsing beneath her throat and arms like cracks inside frozen ice. She looked terrified, not dangerous, terrified. "Do not come closer," she whispered. Her voice shook hard enough to break on the last word. "I cannot stop it." Another sharp metallic groan echoed through the room. One of the storage lockers bent inward with a screech. Ethan's survival instincts screamed at him to get out. He had spent 6 years in the war listening to instincts like that. They usually kept people alive. But something about the look in Lasara's eyes stopped him. She was not trying to hurt him. She was trying not to. Ethan slowly placed the flashlight down on the counter. "Hey," he said carefully. "Look at me." "Run." "Not happening." The blue light surged brighter for a second. Wind burst outward from nowhere, scattering papers and rattling the walls hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling pipes. Lysara stumbled backward, grabbing her own wrist like she was physically fighting something beneath her skin. Ethan caught a glimpse of it then, a faint circular shape glowing through the fabric near the center of her chest. Mechanical. Embedded. His eyes narrowed. What is that? Lysara's breathing became uneven. Please, she whispered. You do not understand. Then explain it to me. Another pulse hit the room. The overhead pipes groaned. Somewhere outside, the station warning sirens suddenly activated across the colony. Ethan recognized the sound immediately. Electromagnetic surge detection. Whatever was happening inside this room was powerful enough for the station sensors to notice. Great. Just great. Lysara pressed herself against the far wall, shaking now. When the episodes begin, people get hurt. Ethan glanced toward the glowing shape beneath her collarbone again. That thing in your chest causing this. She froze. For half a second, surprise broke through the fear in her face. You can see it? Hard to miss when the room looks like it is about to launch into orbit. The faintest breath of disbelief crossed her expression. Most humans probably would have panicked by now. Ethan just sounded annoyed. He had always been strangely calm during disasters. Maybe because after enough bad days, fear simply got tired. Slowly, carefully, Ethan took one step toward her. Then another. Lysara's eyes widened immediately. No, you said everyone around you suffers. Ethan kept his voice steady. But you were still trying to protect me. The floating tools around the room trembled harder. Ethan ignored them. That does not sound like a monster to me. Lysara stared at him in stunned silence. The blue glow beneath her skin flickered unevenly now, weaker somehow. Ethan stopped less than 3 feet away, close enough to see tiny silver markings around her eyes, close enough to notice tears gathering there. Breathe, he said quietly. Slow. You should be afraid. Probably. Ethan shrugged slightly. But I am getting real tired of people telling me what to do. For the first time since arriving at Capri Ridge, Lysara let out something dangerously close to a laugh. Small, fragile, almost broken, but human enough to warm the frozen room for half a second. Then her knees buckled. Ethan moved instantly, catching her before she hit the floor. The moment his hands touched her arms, a violent pulse of blue light flashed through the room. Every monitor in the cabin exploded into static. The heater shut down completely, and beneath Lysara's skin, the glowing device embedded near her heart suddenly emitted a sharp mechanical sound, like something ancient had just recognized him. The blue light vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Silence crashed into the room so hard it almost rang in Ethan's ears. A loose wrench clattered onto the floor beside his boot. Then another. One by one, the floating objects dropped lifelessly across the cabin until only the sound of the storm remained outside. Ethan stayed crouched beside Lysara, his arms still supporting her weight. She felt freezing cold. Not the normal cold of skin exposed to winter air. Something deeper, like holding someone who had spent too long standing in space without sunlight. Her breathing came in shallow pulls against his shoulder. Easy, Ethan muttered quietly. You are okay. Lysara's eyes fluttered open slightly. Confusion crossed her face first, then panic. She pulled away from him immediately. Did I hurt you? Ethan blinked once. Besides almost turning my kitchen into a flying hardware store? Not really. You should not joke. You keep saying that. Ethan leaned back against the wall, exhaling tiredly. The emergency backup lights finally flickered on overhead, washing the room in dim orange light. Most of the electronics were dead now. The heater remained silent. Frost crawled slowly across the inside of the windows. Ethan rubbed a hand through his hair. Well, he muttered. That could have gone better. To his surprise, Lysara stared at him for a long moment before another tiny laugh escaped her. Weak, exhausted, but real. It lasted less than a second before guilt returned to her expression. I lost control again. Ethan looked toward the faint glow beneath her collarbone. Even through the fabric of her dark uniform, he could still see the outline of the circular device embedded under her skin. Metallic lines spread outward from it, like frozen roots. That thing in your chest, he said carefully. What exactly is it? Lysara immediately looked away. You should not ask questions that place you in danger. Pretty sure danger moved into my house about an hour ago. She closed her eyes briefly. Ethan noticed her hands trembling now, though she was clearly trying to hide it. Not fear of him, fear of herself. He recognized it because he had seen soldiers look the same way after the war. People afraid of what might happen if they lost control for even 1 second. Ethan slowly stood and walked toward the dead heater unit. "Sit tight," he said. "I need to restart the thermal core before we both freeze." "You are still helping me." Ethan grabbed a toolkit from beneath the counter. "Yeah. Why?" He paused for a second at that question. Because honestly, he did not fully know anymore. Maybe because she looked more abandoned than dangerous. Maybe because everyone on that landing platform had looked at her like a problem instead of a person. Or maybe because the moment she lost control, her first instinct had been to protect him instead of herself. Ethan crouched beside the heater panel and popped the rusted cover loose. "During the war," he said quietly while adjusting burned wiring, "I watched people do terrible things because they were scared." Sparks flickered briefly between the wires. "I promised myself if I ever got out alive, I would stop treating fear like a good reason to abandon people." The room fell silent again except for the distant storm. Ethan worked for another minute before the heater finally coughed back to life with a low mechanical hum. Warm air slowly pushed into the cabin. Behind him, Lasara watched in complete silence. Not suspicious anymore, just confused. Like kindness itself was something foreign. Ethan stood and wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth. "There. We survive another night." Lasara lowered her eyes toward the floor. "Most humans would have reported me already. Most humans did not spend 6 years repairing military reactors held together with duct tape and bad decisions." A faint glow reflected across the cabin walls as snow drifted past outside. Lasara hesitated before speaking again. "Ethan." It was the first time she had said his name softly instead of like a warning. "When you touched me." Her expression tightened carefully. "The seal reacted." Ethan frowned slightly. "Seal?" Lasara's golden eyes lifted toward him again. Fear returned there instantly. "That has never happened before." The storm outside intensified sometime after midnight. Snow hammered against the steel walls in uneven waves while freezing wind screamed through the refinery towers beyond the cliffs. Inside the cabin, the lights remained dim and unstable, occasionally flickering whenever the station power grid strained under the weather. Ethan sat cross-legged on the floor near the heater with an old diagnostic scanner spread open across his lap. Lasara remained on the edge of the bed across the room, wrapped in the faded blue thermal blanket he had given her earlier. Neither of them had slept. The silence between them no longer felt hostile, just careful. Ethan adjusted a cracked sensor module and glanced toward her again. "So this seal thing," he said casually. "You planning to explain it eventually?" Lasara lowered her eyes. "You should stop asking questions. You keep saying that too." Another faint flicker of blue moved beneath the skin near her throat before fading. Ethan noticed she looked weaker now. The glowing lines beneath her skin seemed dimmer than before, almost unstable. "You are exhausted," she admitted quietly. Ethan snorted. "That is called adulthood." For a second, Lasara almost smiled again. It disappeared quickly. "No," she whispered. "I mean because of me." Ethan leaned back against the wall. "You know, most cursed people I have met were usually politicians." Her expression shifted somewhere between confusion and disbelief. "You joke when you are afraid." Ethan stared at the failing heater vents for a moment before answering. "Occupational hazard." Outside, thunder rolled across the frozen valley again. The station lights beyond the frosted windows briefly dimmed. Ethan glanced down at the scanner in his hands, then back toward her chest. "That device inside you," he said more seriously now. "It is mechanical." Lasara immediately stiffened. "Ethan, I spent years repairing military hardware. I know what engineered systems look like." He tilted his head slightly. "That thing is not natural." The room fell silent again. Lasara's fingers tightened around the blanket. "The Empire told everyone I was cursed," she said finally. "It was easier that way." Ethan frowned. "Easier than what?" Her golden eyes lifted toward him slowly. "Than telling them the truth." The heater hummed softly between them while snow drifted across the windows behind her. "When I was 12 years old," she continued quietly, "they found something beneath the dead moons outside Imperial space." Ethan listened carefully now. "An artifact?" She nodded once. "Ancient. Alive in ways our science did not understand." A faint tremor passed through the lights overhead. The researchers who studied it began hearing voices. Entire stations lost power. Ships vanished. Ethan felt. The back of his neck tightened slightly. Lasara looked away again before continuing. The Empire feared panic, so they created containment systems. Her hand slowly moved toward the glowing shape beneath her collarbone. And eventually, they created me. Ethan stared at her. They put that thing inside a child? I survived the bonding process. Her voice remained calm, but Ethan could hear something buried underneath it. Not anger. Worse, resignation. The others did not. The room suddenly felt colder again despite the heater running at full power. Ethan rubbed a hand slowly across his jaw. So the curse is a prison. Her voice nearly broke this time. The seal inside me suppresses the entity linked to the artifact. Ethan looked at her differently now. Not as some mysterious imperial exile. Not as a dangerous woman carrying bad luck. But as someone who had spent her entire life turned into a container for something nobody else wanted to face. And when the seal weakens? He asked carefully. Lasara's eyes lowered toward the floor. The thing inside begins searching for a way out. Silence settled heavily between them. Then suddenly, every monitor in the cabin blinked back to life at once. Static flooded the screens. Strange symbols flashed across Ethan's old mining terminal in bright blue light. Neither of them touched it. Lasara froze instantly. The color drained from her face. Ethan slowly turned toward the terminal as distorted audio crackled through the speakers. A voice emerged beneath the static. Ancient. Mechanical. Not entirely human. Host synchronization detected. Then the screen displayed a single line. Identify secondary compatible subject, Ethan Vale. The cabin went completely silent after the message appeared on the screen. Even the storm outside seemed distant for a moment. Ethan stared at the glowing words while static hissed softly through the speakers. Identify secondary compatible subject, Ethan Vale. The letters pulsed once in cold blue light before the monitor flickered again. Lasara stood up, so quickly the blanket slipped from her shoulders. Fear flooded her face instantly. Real fear this time. Not fear of herself. Fear for him. Step away from the terminal, she said sharply. Ethan did not move. I am starting to really hate mysterious glowing technology. Ethan. Her voice tightened hard. Now. Something in her tone finally made him listen. Ethan stepped backward just as the monitor emitted another burst of static. A strange symbol flashed across the screen. Circular. Ancient looking. The same shape embedded beneath Lasara's skin. Then everything shut off again. Darkness swallowed the room except for the weak orange glow of the heater. Ethan slowly exhaled through his nose. Okay, he muttered. That feels important. Lasara looked pale beneath the dim lights. Her hands trembled slightly at her sides. This cannot happen. Clearly it just did. No human has ever triggered a synchronization response before. Ethan folded his arms. Synchronization with what exactly? Lasara hesitated too long. Ethan noticed. You do know. Her golden eyes lowered. The entity inside the seal adapts to consciousness around it. Meaning it studies people. Ethan let out a tired laugh. Fantastic. I always wanted to be analyzed by ancient cosmic nightmares. But Lasara did not smile this time. You do not understand, she whispered. The last time the system searched for compatibility, an entire research division disappeared. Silence settled heavily into the cabin again. Ethan looked back toward the dead monitor. His reflection stared faintly back at him through the black screen. Tired eyes. Stubble. Grease stains still on his sleeves from fixing the heater. Just a mechanic buried on a frozen mining world. Nothing special. So why him? Maybe your machine is broken, he said finally. Lasara shook her head immediately. Imperial seals do not malfunction. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck slowly. You keep talking about the Empire like they know what they are doing. That almost sounded bitter enough to surprise her. They feared extinction, she answered quietly. Fear makes governments cruel. Ethan stared at her for a second after that. Funny hearing an alien noble summarize human history so accurately. Outside, thunder rolled again through the refinery valley. Snow drifted across the windows in thick, white waves. The station loudspeakers crackled somewhere beyond the cabin walls. Curfew warning. Weather lockdown extended until morning. Nobody in or out of Kepri Ridge tonight. Ethan walked toward the kitchen counter and grabbed 2 metal cups. Coffee. Lasara blinked at him. After this. Especially after this. He poured the last of the bitter station coffee into the heater kettle and leaned against the counter while waiting for it to warm. Lysara watched him carefully now, not like she feared him, more like she was trying to solve him. "You should be asking why the Empire sent me here specifically," she said quietly. Ethan shrugged. "I assumed because the universe enjoys ruining my evenings." "Ethan." Her voice softened slightly. This colony was not random. That made him pause. The kettle hissed quietly between them. "Explain." Lysara stepped closer to the window, staring out into the storm beyond the glass. Kepri Ridge sits above one of the oldest mining fractures in the sector. Her reflection shimmered faintly against the snow outside. Imperial researchers discovered energy signatures here decades ago, similar to the artifact that created the seal. Ethan frowned slowly. "You are saying whatever is inside you came from this planet?" "Part of it." A cold feeling settled into Ethan's stomach then. He glanced instinctively toward the floor beneath them. Miles of tunnels. Ancient rock. Endless darkness below the refinery. "The Empire believes something beneath the ice is waking up," Lysara whispered. At that exact moment, the cabin lights flickered again. The heater sputtered violently. Then deep beneath the station floor, something massive emitted a low mechanical sound. Not an earthquake. Not machinery. A pulse. Slow. Heavy. Alive. Ethan felt it vibrate straight through the steel beneath his boots, while Lysara closed her eyes in horror. "It found us," she whispered. The pulse beneath the station floor came again 30 seconds later. Slower this time. Stronger. Metal cups rattled softly across Ethan's kitchen counter while frost drifted from the ceiling pipes like falling ash. Somewhere outside, refinery alarms began, echoing through the colony. Not emergency sirens. Evacuation warnings. Ethan recognized the tone instantly. Deep core instability. He moved toward the window, wiping condensation from the glass with his sleeve. Across the frozen valley, massive floodlights had activated around the mining pits. Tiny transport vehicles crawled through the snow while workers rushed between platforms. Even from half a mile away, Ethan could see panic spreading through the colony. "That is not good," he muttered. Behind him, Lysara stood completely motionless. Her eyes had lost focus slightly, like she was listening to something very far away. "It is awake," she whispered. Ethan turned back toward her. "You keep saying that like we are discussing bad weather." Lysara pressed a trembling hand against the glowing seal beneath her collarbone. "The artifact beneath this planet is connected to the one inside me." Another pulse rolled through the station, strong enough this time to dim the cabin lights for 2 full seconds. Ethan swore under his breath. "Okay, hypothetically speaking, what happens if this thing fully wakes up?" Lysara looked at him then, really looked at him, and whatever answer she carried behind those golden eyes terrified her more than death ever could. Civilizations disappear. Silence filled the room after that. The heater hummed weakly in the corner while snow hammered against the windows hard enough to sound like static. Ethan stared at her for a long moment before rubbing both hands across his face. "You know," he muttered tiredly, "when I said I wanted a quiet life after the war, apparently the universe took that personally." Lysara almost smiled again. Almost. Then the station speakers crackled overhead. "Attention, all personnel. Unauthorized Imperial vessels detected entering Kepri Ridge airspace. Security lockdown in effect." Ethan froze. Lysara's expression immediately darkened. "They found me." Through the storm outside, dark shapes emerged between the clouds. Sleek silver ships descended over the refinery like predators moving through fog. Searchlights swept across the snowfields below. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Friends of yours?" "No," her voice lowered carefully. "Recovery teams." Recovery sounds friendly. It is not. Another announcement echoed through the colony. Civilian residents are ordered to remain inside until retrieval operations conclude. Ethan looked toward Lysara again. "Retrieval operations?" She swallowed once before answering. "The Empire does not allow living weapons to remain uncontrolled." Ethan's expression hardened immediately at the word weapon. "You are not a weapon." Lysara looked genuinely confused by that statement, like nobody had ever contradicted the label before. Outside, engines roared across the valley as armored transports landed near the central mining platforms. Ethan could already imagine what was happening down there. Soldiers sealing exits, searching homes, taking control. He had seen enough military occupations during the war to recognize the rhythm of one instantly. Then his terminal screen flickered back to life by itself. Blue symbols flooded across the monitor again. This time the ancient voice sounded clearer. Closer. Primary sealed destabilizing. Lasara stiffened immediately. No. Containment breach probability increasing. Ethan stepped toward the terminal cautiously. Can somebody explain why my appliances suddenly sound possessed? The monitor ignored him completely. Secondary compatible subject required for synchronization. Then the screen displayed a schematic Ethan immediately recognized. His own biometric profile. Heart rate. Neural patterns. Military records. Files he had not seen since the war. His stomach tightened. How does this thing know who I am? Lasara looked horrified now. It is searching your memories. Ethan stared at the screen while cold realization slowly settled into place. The seal had reacted to him for a reason. Not random chance. Not coincidence. Something inside the artifact recognized him specifically. Then suddenly every light in the cabin shut off again. Complete darkness swallowed the room. Outside, a massive pulse erupted beneath the colony floor. Ethan grabbed the counter to steady himself as the entire station trembled violently. Somewhere deep below the ice, something enormous emitted a low mechanical sound that almost resembled a heartbeat. And in the darkness beside him, Lasara whispered the words Ethan had been dreading since the moment she arrived. It wants you now. For 3 full seconds, neither of them moved. The darkness inside the cabin felt heavier now. Alive somehow. Ethan could still feel the vibration beneath the station floor pulsing through his boots in slow mechanical waves. Not random. Rhythmic. Like something enormous was breathing beneath miles of frozen rock. Outside, searchlights from the imperial ships swept across the colony through the storm. White beams cut through the snow like knives. Lasara stepped backward from the terminal slowly, her face pale beneath the faint blue glow still flickering under her skin. This should not be possible, she whispered. Ethan rubbed a tired hand across his jaw. That sentence stopped being comforting a while ago. The emergency lights flickered back online one by one, casting dim orange shadows across the cabin walls. Ethan glanced toward the dead monitor again. His own military records had appeared on the screen. Files buried years ago. Psychological evaluations. Neural compatibility scans from his combat service. Someone had archived everything. The Empire knew about me, he realized quietly. Lasara closed her eyes briefly. That silence answered him before her words did. You were not chosen randomly for the Union assignment. Ethan let out a slow breath through his nose. Of course I was not. Outside, transport engines roared somewhere above the station. Then came the sound Ethan had hoped not to hear. Heavy boots moving through the snow outside his housing block. Multiple people. Organized. Imperial soldiers. Lasara heard it too. Fear crossed her expression instantly. They are here. Ethan moved immediately toward the storage locker near the door. Any bright ideas? You cannot fight Imperial recovery teams. Good thing I was not planning to. He opened the locker and pulled out an old insulated field jacket along with a portable mining lantern. Lasara watched him in confusion. What are you doing? Ethan grabbed a small toolkit from the shelf beside the door. The station has emergency maintenance tunnels beneath the refinery cliffs. Ethan, you said the thing under the ice is waking up. He shrugged into the jacket. I would really prefer not to be here when nervous soldiers and ancient cosmic machines start interacting. A loud metallic knock suddenly slammed against the cabin door. Imperial Retrieval Authority, a voice announced from outside. Open immediately. Lasara visibly flinched at the sound. Ethan noticed something in that reaction that bothered him deeply. Not anger. Not hatred. Conditioning. Like someone used to obeying even when terrified. The knock came again, harder this time. Ethan stepped closer to her. Can you walk? She looked stunned by the question. You are helping me escape? Well, I doubt they are here to invite you to dinner. Another heavy impact rattled the doorframe. Ethan glanced toward the back maintenance hatch. Old. Rusted. But still functional. Move. Lasara hesitated. If they find you aiding me, your citizenship protections will be revoked. Ethan smirked faintly while grabbing the lantern. Lady, I lost faith in governments around the same time I started paying taxes. For the briefest second, despite the fear surrounding them, Lasara laughed softly. The sound almost warmed the frozen room. Then the cabin lights flickered violently again. The glowing seal beneath her collarbone suddenly surged brighter than ever before. Ethan turned instantly as blue symbols flashed across every dead screen in the cabin simultaneously. The ancient voice returned. Clearer now. Stronger. Primary host experiencing emotional synchronization. Lysara froze in horror. No. Secondary subject compatibility increasing. Ethan stared at the glowing monitors while the pounding on the front door intensified outside. Containment transfer now possible. Silence crashed into the room. Ethan slowly looked toward Lysara. Her eyes filled with fear so raw it barely looked survivable. Ethan, she whispered shakily. If the seal transfers to you. She could not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Ethan finally understood. The artifact beneath the planet was not searching for a victim. It was searching for someone capable of carrying the prison after her. And somehow, for reasons neither of them understood, it had chosen him. The pounding on the cabin door stopped abruptly. That silence felt worse. Ethan stood motionless near the back maintenance hatch while blue light flickered across the walls from the glowing monitors around them. Lysara looked like she could barely breathe. The transfer cannot happen, she whispered. You do not understand what it would do to you. Ethan glanced toward the frozen window where imperial searchlights swept across the storm outside. Pretty sure we ran out of safe options 10 minutes ago. The ancient voice echoed through the cabin again. Calm. Mechanical. Endless. Containment integrity below acceptable threshold. Every light in the room pulsed blue. The seal beneath Lysara's collarbone burned brighter in response. She gasped softly and grabbed the edge of the table for support. Ethan moved toward her instinctively. Hey, do not touch me. Her voice cracked this time. Please. Ethan stopped anyway. Not because he feared her. Because he finally understood what she was asking. She was not trying to protect herself anymore. She was trying to protect him. Outside, the storm suddenly went silent. Completely silent. Ethan frowned immediately. On mining worlds, storms never stopped instantly. Then the ground beneath the station pulsed again. Hard enough this time to crack frost from the ceiling pipes. Somewhere deep below the ice, something ancient awakened another inch closer to the surface. The cabin monitors erupted with static. Then every screen displayed the same image. A massive circular structure buried beneath endless black ice. Covered in glowing symbols. Breathing blue light into the darkness like a mechanical heart. Ethan stared at it while cold realization settled into his chest. That thing underground is not a machine, Lysara whispered weakly. It is alive. The front door suddenly hissed open. Imperial soldiers flooded the entrance in silver armor glowing beneath the emergency lights. Weapons raised. Search beams swept across the cabin instantly before locking onto Lysara. Primary host identified, the lead officer. Announced mechanically. Containment retrieval authorized. Ethan stepped between them without even thinking about it. The soldiers hesitated slightly. One of them lowered his weapon half an inch. Citizen Ethan Vale, the officer said. Stand aside immediately. Ethan folded his arms slowly. No, Lysara looked stunned behind him. Ethan, you dragged her across half the galaxy and called it mercy, he said quietly. Funny thing is, it looks a lot more like fear. The room fell silent except for the storm beginning to scream outside once more. The officer's helmet tilted slightly toward him. You do not understand the scale of the threat. Maybe not. Ethan glanced back toward Lysara for half a second. Her golden eyes were wide with disbelief. But I understand what happens when people stop seeing someone as a person. Something changed in her expression then. Something fragile. Human. The monitors suddenly flashed violently again. Blue light exploded across the cabin walls as the ancient voice returned one final time. Emergency synchronization required. Lysara's seal erupted with blinding light. She cried out softly and nearly collapsed. Ethan caught her before she hit the floor. The moment his hands touched her, the entire station went silent. No alarms. No engines. No storm. Just stillness. Then warmth spread through Ethan's chest. Not pain. Not fear. Warmth. He looked down in shock as faint blue light moved beneath his own skin for the briefest second before fading. Across the room, every Imperial soldier lowered their weapons slowly. The monitors stabilized instantly. Deep beneath the frozen planet, the massive pulse stopped. Silence filled the cabin while Lysara stared up at Ethan in complete disbelief. Tears shimmered faintly in her glowing eyes. "Why?" she whispered. Ethan looked at her for a long moment before answering softly. "Because somebody should have stayed beside you a long time ago." Outside the cabin windows, the storm clouds above Kepri Ridge slowly began to part. For the first time in years, pale starlight touched the frozen colony beneath them. And standing there in the silence, with ancient blue light fading gently beneath his skin and her trembling hand still holding on to his jacket, Ethan finally understood the truth the Empire never did. Lysara was never the curse. She was the only thing holding it back.